What I'm going to share with you is personally in your own life has life-changing potential. And whenever I teach, one of the things I like people to do is to see their possibilities. Because every one of us in this room have possibilities beyond what we are receiving right now. You do understand that, correct? And so what I'm so excited about in this teaching is that this is going to be so biblical, it's going to be so practical, it's going to be so simple, that every one of us, whether you're watching us at different sites or online, right here in the local place, every one of us we're just going to get to go higher today. And the way that we go higher is by answering this question, because this is the foundation of everything I'm going to teach today. How many of you would, with true enthusiasm, but also a real sense of knowing this to be true, would raise your hand and say, John, I believe that God is a generous God? How many of you buy into the fact God is He's a generous God? He's generous. And every hand, I think, again, was raised because we know that He's an incredibly generous God. And I'm going to teach you about how to live generously yourself. But living generously yourself begins with a recognition that our God is a generous God. That's our foundation. If we don't have a generous God, I have nothing to teach this morning. Because people do what people see. And what we get to see throughout the scriptures is the fact that God is amazingly generous. In fact, you're going to have more scripture from this teaching than any teaching you ever heard me teach. And the reason for that is I've got to make sure that you understand this isn't John's message, this isn't Todd's message, this is God's message. You got to understand who the source is. And so I'm going to just kind of just kill you with scripture, okay? You're going to ask, oh, dear Lord, another one. Here comes another one, another. But you've got to understand, everything I teach you is so biblically based, so God ordained, that I don't want you to think I'm teaching this to you. All I'm doing is relaying the teaching that I have learned, that I have lived, and that I have loved. So let's go. Psalm 105. For God is sheer beauty, all generous in love, loyal always and ever. Psalm 145, 16. I love this. God is generous to a fault. You lavish your favor on all creatures. Now, this is scripture that you find out throughout the Bible. But in Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 10, this generous God begins to speak to us about the lifestyle that we need to live. Give freely and spontaneously. Don't have a stingy heart. The way you handle matters like this triggers God. Ooh, that is a powerful statement. Got to come back to that in a moment. The way you handle matters like this triggers God, your God's blessing in everything you do, all your work and all your ventures. So I command you, always be generous, open purse, open hands. In other words, be generous. Be generous with your open purse, your money. Be generous with your hands, your works, the things that you do. In other words, he said, just be generous. But that phrase, the way that you handle matters like your possessions, it triggers God. What does that mean, it triggers God? In other words, God sees how we respond to the blessings he's given us. And when we respond according to who he is, a generous heart, a generous hand, when we respond like this, it means God responds. It triggers him. In other words, God says, I see that. I see how you're passing on the blessings. I see how you understand. You're to be a river, not a reservoir. And the moment that he sees that and you're in my life, it begins to trigger his heart, and he responds, and he even blesses you more than you can imagine. You see, you have a shovel and God has a shovel, and as you take the blessings God gives you, and you shovel it out to others, he looks down and he sees you shoveling, and so he says, I'll shovel more. But the difference is God's shovel is bigger than yours. And when he sees this happening, it triggers his heart. It brings great joy to him, and he said, I'm going to respond to that. I see what they're doing. I'm going to even bless them more. You see, when we grew up, We grew up in a home that understood stewardship, understood generosity. We were taught tithing as children. I mean, when we got our first dollar in allowance, we got paid in dimes, 10 dimes. And the reason we got paid in dimes is because my parents said the first dime goes to God. That's the first fruit. And so we'd get 10 dimes, and we'd set aside when we got our allowance, our dime, and on the way to church, we'd pick up our dime, and we'd go to our Sunday school class, and we'd put our dime in. And my brother one day he instead of a dime, he picked up 3 dimes. And Dad said, what are you doing with the other 2 dimes? Oh, he said, I'm going to give it to God this week. He said, he's like 8 years old. He said, God's been really good to me this week. You have a choice. I have a choice. This choice that you make will determine your entire life, whether you live in abundance or whether you live in scarcity. And by the way, it's your choice, because God's already shown that he's an abundant God. So you have an abundant God. If you really want to know what is an oxymoron, it's an abundant, generous God and a closed, stingy Christian. That doesn't even match. That's so incompatible. So I'm so excited. I'm going to unlock it for you now. It's going to all happen. And when I unlock it, I'm just going to unlock it scriptural to you. But I promise you, in the next 18 minutes, you're going to understand this world, and you can choose at the end of this service. You can choose at the end of this. This is who I am. This is going to be my identity, and this is going to be what I do. So generous living means 5 things. Number 1, that we live what I call a yes life. It's a yes life. Philippians chapter 4, verse 8 and 9. By the way, the passage I'm about to read you, I wrote my first book called Think on These Things. It came from this passage of scripture, okay? That's my first book. And you don't want to get the book because honestly, it wasn't that good and there's not that much to think on, okay? My name's John, I'm your friend. It was my first book. You're never good the first time. Sadly, I wasn't too good the second time or the third time. But about the 7th time, I got really good. Just took a little practice, okay? But this verse right here, this comes out of my first book. Summing it all up, friends, I'll say you'll do best by filling your minds and meditating on things true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious, the best, not the worst, the beautiful, not the ugly, things to praise, not things to curse. Now that is yes living. And yes living, Paul teaches us here, means that we choose good things to think on. Don't miss this. Choose good things. It's your choice. You get a call. You can choose on bad. You can choose good things, bad things. It's your call. We choose good things to think on. Then we fill our minds with those things, and then we think about those things. And if you'll do those 3 things, just you choose what you're going to think on, then you fill your mind with that. And then as you fill your mind, now you begin to meditate until you act on it, that you become what I call a yes liver. And when you become a yes liver, you begin to lean into what the Bible would call abundance living. Because you see, the greatest gap between successful and unsuccessful people is how they think. Trust me. My name is John, I'm your friend. Trust me. Outside of sharing my faith, that's always first. Outside of sharing my faith, if I could sit across the table with you for 30 minutes, what I would talk to you more than anything else is we would talk about how you think. Because the world that you think about is the world that you receive. That is an absolute fact. It's biblical. It's proven historically in the lives of people. Huge gap between how successful people be. In fact, seldom do I do this, but I'm going to give you a book to get called How Successful People Think. Trust me. In that book, I give you 11 thinking patterns of successful people that unsuccessful people don't have. It's a book of contrast. If you want to be successful, think on these 11 things, have these 11 patterns of things. If you don't want to be, if you want to live in scarcity all your life, and it just basically try to make it, there are 11 thinking patterns of scarcity people too. how successful people think. Here's what I know. For a long time, I've become a yes man. And I'm not only a yes person, but I'm a yes leader. Many, many years ago, when McDonald's just started open, Margaret and I were dating. We've been married 54 years, so could do the math. I mean, this was McDonald's was on the outside, not on the inside. And I went up, and Margaret liked a Diet Coke, and I asked for a Diet Coke, and the girl, she said, I'm so sorry. She looked at her little register, said, we don't have Diet Coke. And okay. I said, could I just have a cup of ice? You know, and I thought I'll get a cup of ice, go to some carry-out store, get a Diet Coke, and take care of Margaret. I mean, you're dating, you do anything to impress them. You know what that's like. And so I said, well, could you just give me a cup of ice? This little girl, she's looking at that. She's looking at that. She can't find a cup of ice on here. It's not on the menu. And finally she said, I'm sorry. I said, I don't think I could do that. And I smiled. I said, oh, yes, you can. And she said, okay. And she got me the cup of ice, and I walked out the cup of ice, went down, got me a Diet Coke somewhere else, and we're all happy. You see, for decades, I have been a yes, you can man. But can I tell you something? It didn't start with me. It started with God. He's a yes, you can God. Number two.